It is great to be joined once again by Luke Vargas, United Nations Bureau Chief for Talk Media News. He was at yesterday's presidential debate, the first presidential debate. Luke, we've been talking about it pretty extensively on today's show. I know that you have a number of different angles that you're going to add for us. First thoughts, I've given some of my high and low points for both candidates. I thought generally most of Trump's strong points were very, very overwhelmingly stacked at the beginning of the debate. I'll open up the floor to you and see what your impression was.
I think I'm probably going to agree with you, at least on that last point. I'll say overall, I think this debate went as well as it possibly could have for Hillary Clinton. I mean, we were talking about this, some concern on the part of the Clinton campaign and some Clinton supporters going into Monday's debate was that this was going to be graded on a curve. Instead, I think it's pretty clear to most people who were there watching it in the press corps, and it seems to be the buzz on the street, is that Hillary Clinton hurdled over a pretty high bar and Donald Trump seemed to trip over a relatively low bar. As far as strengths for each candidate, I think Hillary's big strength was her preparation. The fact that, people were saying she has a difficult task out there. Probably the policy part will be easy, but it's going to be actually having the right affect, the right presentation, as a way of countering Donald Trump. And I think she succeeded in that really well. Her campaign obviously spun this going into the debate, saying, yeah, she has been taking this seriously. She spent a few weeks working on this. And I think it showed. In particular, she was able to be cool, calm, and collective. The three big things you always want sort of in a presidential demeanor. But at the same time, knew when to try and get under Donald Trump's skin. It's been reported by Ezra Klein and others that Donald Trump's children and most of the people at his companies sort of have a habit, and he's used to them calling him Mr. Trump and other very formal titles. And I think Hillary Clinton was very smart here to say, look, whatever about decorum, I don't need to call him Mr. Trump and just fall into that. I'm going to call him Donald. And I think there was ample evidence last night that that was one of a few things that she did that when she was speaking subtly sort of got him out of his groove. And I think that balance, in addition, also knowing sort of when she was on the split screen and that she shouldn't just turn off her presentation when she wasn't answering a question, really showed that the debate preparation was one of her big strengths. I'll say very quickly about Donald Trump. I think the best thing he did is what he's been doing best all along. Granted, it's taking up less and less time within debates, but he continues to be strong on free trade. He continues, I think, to resonate with voters in key states, key constituencies when it comes to economic sort of dislocation in the modern age. When we're talking about crumbling American infrastructure, he speaks about it with a passion and I think an authority that people resonate with. And it's worth pointing out, I've heard this a lot over the last week, sort of a revisionist history on the part of Democrats that, in 2008, Barack Obama was able to win because he was offering up an end of American military adventurism, that it was a referendum on pulling the troops out of Iraq and Afghanistan. Went back and looked at polls. Going into Election Day in 2008, John McCain was ahead handily when it came to foreign policy. It was the fact that on issues that really concerned Americans about the economy, of course, in the midst of sort of an economic disaster at that time, that was the big issue that got Barack Obama into office. So I think, again, issues of trade and these other things may have only taken up a few minutes in the debate, but Hillary Clinton needs to figure out a way to neutralize him on those issues. Because I think they have an outsized influence when it comes down to who's actually going to decide this election.
Yeah, I did earlier and it wasn't tongue in cheek. It's just that the best Trump moments were still not that good. But one of the three that I had was related to NAFTA and how he was actually able to, still without really giving any policy prescriptions, which he almost completely avoided in the debate, he was at least able to optically come across as strong and more sort of determined in a sense than Hillary Clinton. Now, you talked about the preparation part as far as Hillary Clinton is concerned. This sort of relates to, you mentioned body language, knowing when she was on a split screen, or really just, I think, assuming she was on a split screen the entire time, acting as if she was. How did the Trump interruptions play in the room?
I think they're a bit jarring. I mean, on some of them, he really just seemed to be unable to stifle himself. There was a point when Lester Holt sort of chastised him and said, this is Hillary Clinton's question. And not 10 seconds later, he was asking Lester Holt a question about Hillary Clinton's answer as she was answering. I mean, that was not just a little violation. It was, he responded to, a slap on the wrist with a much more serious infraction of the rules of the debate. So I found that to be quite strange. I mean, again, Donald Trump says he did not prepare for this debate. I don't believe that. In fact, you look at some of the people he's brought onto his campaign in recent weeks, someone like Roger Ailes in particular, who's been in the business of preparing candidates for their, television debates for decades now, and is, by all accounts, relatively good at that. But I think he may have spent too much time thinking about preparation on a policy sense, though again, there's not a lot of details to point to that. But he, I think, really dropped the ball. Preparation for Donald Trump should have been maintaining his composure on the stage. There's a lot of things you can get away with on a field of 16, whether it's having a sip of water repeatedly, whether it's sort of sniffling, whether it is saying words like bigly twice, which I think people hear when it's the one of only two voices on stage. So I think he dropped the ball there. It was rightly pointed out that his body language, he was slumping at times. There was a moment when Hillary Clinton started talking about race relations, and he sort of seemed to fall over the microphone and emit an audible sigh. Those are just sort of things that I think Hillary Clinton, when we talk about debate, it's about more than just having the binders with the issues and going through the mock debates with stand-ins for your opponent. It's about having technologically advanced setups where you've got multiple cameras, you've got multiple monitors, people, Hillary looking essentially in a mirror to see what she looks like when she's listening, having a good listening face. I think those are elements of her performance that she really excelled in, and where I don't think there's a good excuse for why Donald Trump wasn't better prepared.
As far as material and issues, my sense was that the birther question was the worst for Trump, in that he could not really explain anything, nor even really answer the question. What's your sense of whether, I mean, do you agree with me on that? Is there some other moment that you find to be the most destructive for Trump?
I think that was a rambling, disorganized answer of the highest order, even by Trump's own standards. I mean, he was referencing journalists that had been dispatched by various campaigns to track down leads, supposedly, in the birther issue. And then he sort of, and again, last week, calling a press conference to say he'd buried this issue and doesn't want anything to do with it anymore. And then to close in his remarks about the birther issue by saying, he did an American service for the country by making sure this issue was brought up in the debate. I mean,
yeah, real patriot.
He clearly doesn't want to divorce himself from this issue when push comes to shove. I think his real unforced error was on taxes. Again, it may not have made a huge splash during the debate, but it's going to be easy fodder for Hillary Clinton. He essentially admitting, sort of in a roundabout way at multiple points, that he may not be paying federal taxes, and that if he were, it would have been squandered. Donald Trump, it's been sort of an amazing thing that for all his privilege and the openings that you and I might see for him to be sort of dinked for that, it hasn't been a big liability for him. But this is one of those issues where he seemed to admit that he is sort of living by a second batch of standards that most Americans don't enjoy. And most of us don't get to choose whether or not we pay our taxes based upon some sort of judgment of whether or not they're going to be used to our liking. That's essentially what Donald Trump admitted. So I think there's a whole tremendous lexicon of ways you can punt issues like your health records or your taxes almost indefinitely in politics. Some of those answers are sort of BS at the end of the day, but there are a lot of excuses things you can say to just sort of forestall that issue. For him to revert into sort of introducing a new problem area, an area for concern on this tax issue, I think was a big mistake on his part.
So there was this moment during the debate yesterday when Donald Trump said, it was, again, like most of the things he said, it didn't really make a lot of sense, but he said something like, it crossed my mind to say something really tough about Hillary Clinton, but I'm not doing it because of some moral reason he gave that he just thought it wouldn't be right. But after the debate, he since said that he might hit harder at the next debate. Is there any consensus as to whether that's related to Bill and Hillary Clinton's marital past? Is it related to, what might that mean?
Well, bear in mind, he talked about inviting various guests to this debate who would get under Hillary Clinton's skin about Bill Clinton's alleged extramarital affairs. There were, he made a threat during the Republican convention, in fact, that there was going to be a video that was going to play, sort of a feature video, I think it was on night 1 or 2, that was going to explore Bill Clinton's escapades, and they ended up shelving that. So it seems to be sort of something he keeps forestalling. I'm sure, he probably has some good lines chambered on that, and he may try to exploit that in a debate to come. but he seems to be unwilling to do it at any one time. You're right. He pointed out that thing saying sort of, I could have gone on the attack against the family. He also had a strange line, and I wish I had the quote, but he sort of said, I'm due some credit for not exploiting the minorities who are renting apartments from me. It's as if, yeah, Hillary Clinton could probably go through a list and say, well, I could have killed this guy or could have ordered a drone strike on this guy, but I didn't. So you should applaud me. I mean, that's
Yeah.
sort of the kind of logic Trump was operating on. I think he may have more stuff to come, but is he running out of time to exploit those? I think that's a very good question.
How soon might we be able to see what, if any, was the electoral or polling impact of yesterday's debate? I mean, usually polls are done over a sampling of 2 or 3 days, which I'm guessing could start as early as today. And then a few days after that, we would see some polling data. Is Monday reasonable?
I think so. At this point, though, I will say I'm not putting a whole lot of stock on national head-to-heads or national four-way polls at this point. I think the biggest thing that's going to decide this is Hillary Clinton getting turnout among her core constituencies, which are minorities, women, and young voters. And I think the biggest thing that she did yesterday was get young voters back on her side. It goes down to her preparation, the way she was able to bait Donald Trump, the 28 interruptions that have been cut into an excellent video by the Clinton campaign and which are going viral, being shared with a lot of young people who need to be showing up for Hillary Clinton. I think her performance really was much more targeted at making sure that third pillar of her electoral strategy is solid. And that's a pillar, young people, that are not going to be represented all that well in national polls. So I'd say maybe let's look at polls in battleground states where things are close: Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan, Virginia, perhaps. But at least at this point, I don't think national polls are really going to give us a full picture of things. I think Hillary Clinton moved the ball pretty far down the field yesterday, but in a way that might be masked by polls. I think it's a lot of the work that she did, so important for her electoral strategy, is sort of behind the scenes. It's about sort of changing the mindsets of people, but not really switching who it is they're supporting.
All right, Luke Vargas, United Nations Bureau Chief for Talk Media News. Thanks as always, Luke.
Thank you, David. Bye-bye.